Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Butler and this is the Working in the Industry show. This is a live TV broadcast filmed and directed by students from New City College. You can watch all our productions live through YouTube by subscribing to the channel HCR On Air, and you can get involved with the show by following at HCR On Air on Twitter, or X as we now must call it. So what is Working in the Industry all about? This is the show where we get the chance to meet and chat with industry professionals, ask questions and find out what it takes to work in the world of media production. So we have questions, our studio audience has questions, but who are we chatting with?
The celebrities are pushed to breaking point.
I didn't sign up for this.
This is going to be something big.
Message. OMG.
Do you guys see what I see?
Okay, I don't know why the hell there's suddenly two of me, but I'm freaking out. Send. What the fuck? No!
How do we know which one's OG, Tala?
I'm so confused. I feel like a bit of weed's going to come out.
Okay. Today we're joined by a video editor with over 10 years experience in editing documentaries, current affairs and entertainment content, including Gogglebox, Love Island and Channel 4's Dispatches, to name but a few. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jack Hallam. Hello. Clap myself. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. This is great to have you. Can you give us a little bit of a background into your job and what it is that you do?
So I am a freelance offline video editor. Basically that means that I'm one of the first people that take a look at the footage, or rushes as they're called in the industry, and I work with an edit producer, usually just two of us in a room, but there's a larger team, and we try and make an hour's television out of usually a day or two's worth of footage. So you're taking maybe 5% of what's filmed and trying to harness the drama, the story, the action, and make everything make sense by sort of moving things around in a clever way, and then add an interview, music, effects to kind of bring the drama out of that. And mostly I work in reality television or factual entertainment. Yeah, I've done a bit of current affairs stuff, like you said, but at the moment I'm kind of on the entertainment circuit, so working around shows like Love Island or Traitors or Married at First Sight, and that kind of grade A content.
Yeah. Well, I love the Traitors. If you think about like an episode of The Traitors, so say it's an hour long and it takes like a whole day of footage, but how long would that take you, do you reckon, to edit into the show?
It's an 8-week schedule for one editor and an edit producer. That would get the show to a level where it's almost ready for broadcast, and then I think there's an extra 2 weeks. So I said I was an offline editor, then we have an online editor when the footage is flipped from low resolution to high resolution, and then they spend a couple of weeks doing grades and adding extra effects, and it also goes through a music pass and a dub. So 10 weeks in total.
Wow, that's a long time. And so we've got a couple of questions, if you're okay to answer those.
Yeah, sure.
So do you think there are any differences in editing for entertainment or reality TV, say compared to film or drama? And do you have like a preference?
So I've done a little bit of editing, like my own projects. Some of them have been scripted drama, and I've worked on some other people's scripted projects like comedy in Australia. But yeah, they're very different, because you'll be following, as with the word, you'll be following a script. So the shots might even be decided, it could be storyboarded. And I guess you'll have lots of different takes of the same scene. With reality, often sometimes they might get you to pick up a word if maybe there was a bang in the back of the shot and they missed it. But generally speaking, the cameras just roll, and at the end of the day, you have to make the best kind of TV show or scene out of what you're given. So, the parameters are very different. Did you say, do I have a preference?
Yeah.
I definitely prefer the reality side of things because of the fact that you're limited in what you can do. So it's a bit of a puzzle, and sometimes it's a headache. But when you've just got 2 cameras to choose from and the coverage isn't great, sometimes you have to be quite creative to get around the gaps in the filming.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. Or sometimes halfway through editing, the people at the top might say, we want this episode to be focusing much more on the drama rather than maybe the sad side of things. So a scene that might originally be, you've kind of put sad music underneath something, they might decide that they want to drop that story entirely and turn it into a bit more of a kind of energized, dramatic scene. So a gear change like that later on in the process is really difficult, but it can be a bit of a headache, but it's a fun challenge.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you mentioned was the drama in reality TV.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit more about how maybe that is concocted, you know, like in the edit room?
It starts at the beginning in the casting process. From people who've watched reality TV, you can see that the people that they bring on are kind of larger-than-life characters a lot of the time, cast specifically to be quite dramatic. They might have already said in interviews that they might struggle in certain situations, so of course then they're put into those situations to get the best reaction. But you're just using shots and the pacing of editing. If you kind of have longer, slower shots that's more familiar with maybe drama-based productions, but faster editing accompanied with fast music generates a bit of energy, so that might create drama as well. But yeah, it's just about finding the right scene and accompanying it with the best interview a lot of the time. That's the first blocking out process. It'll just be footage followed by interview followed by footage, and then you try and just make the story make sense. And then once you've got something that's almost to length, because you're trying to hit maybe a 15-minute running time for an hour-long episode, because you have to give time for adverts as well. Once you're kind of at that level, then you'll start to put music down and really tighten it.
Yeah. And we got one about kind of how you initially got into the industry, because I know a lot of our students here would be interested in that. And what were your kind of first breaks?
So, straight out of university, I ended up doing an internship in Amsterdam. That was like the first kind of position that I had, even though I was only paid €200 a month, so not a lot. That was probably the first job that I got. So I went down a kind of internship route, which I know is quite a tried and tested one. And yeah, I got a lot of useful skills out of that. It didn't, because it was Amsterdam, I don't think it opened up my network necessarily. I did meet lots of people from all over the world, who were living all over the world, who were also doing internships in Amsterdam. So that kind of opened up my network socially, and I guess maybe there's been some work through that, but it wasn't until I came back to London and I was trying to get on the radar of lots of like company directors working for production companies. So I started speaking to my friends and family and trying to kind of exploit any contacts they might have. And eventually there was a guy called Rich Moss, who was the managing director at a post-production company called Gorilla in Cardiff. And he agreed to have like a cup of tea and an informal chat. And if you ever get asked to one of those be under no illusion that it's basically an interview. It's an informal interview. So I was grilled. He kind of tried to establish what my level of technical experience was. I didn't embellish too much at that point because I didn't want to just get dropped into something that I wasn't able to do. And then after a few emails back and forth, there was a job in Abu Dhabi. I thought I'd struck gold. It was a 10-week job, and they wanted people who had Final Cut Pro experience, which is an editing software. I don't think it's really used anymore, or sometimes people use Final Cut Pro X, but it was basically made by Apple and decommissioned now. But yeah, in Abu Dhabi, they were using this bit of software which I'd used in university. So yeah, I went out to Abu Dhabi for 10 weeks. I spent the first 4 weeks trying to pretend like I knew what I was doing, and kind of learning the job as I went. And after 4 weeks, my boss asked me a question that I'm sure most people in the industry would know the answer to after just being there for a year. And I think I gave him this glazed, blanked over expression, and he very quickly just realized that I was very junior. But by that point, I'd kind of got to know the job enough that I think he kind of forgave my shortcomings. Yeah.
So is that the sort of fake it till you make it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessarily lying,
Yeah.
but I think there's a bit of that with those first early steps in your career. And there's so much that you're going to have to learn on the job, that whether going to university or anything, even if you're experiencing other positions, it's so niche as an industry and people do things different ways as well, that they expect that you're going to have to pick up some things while you're working there.
I think there's a really good point you make about when you get into the industry, you kind of sometimes need to make things work for you, don't you? Rather than just, if you go with a job that you've got the exact experience for, you could spend your entire life never getting the job you want. So
Yeah.
I think a good thing for everyone in the audience to think about is just use those skills that you've got and let yourself kind of develop and just keep going for it. I mean, it must be quite scary being quite junior, in a different country.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, I think what happened with that situation though, they'd brought over quite a lot of other Brits as well, and I think just being friendly and open to kind of learning will kind of get you quite far as well. So I just made kind of good relationships with the people around me, and they took me under their wing a little bit, and by the end of the process I felt like my confidence had gone up a lot, and I'd learned lots of transferable skills that were immediately useful afterwards as well.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple more questions about the students' projects as well. So they've just been working on a live TV project. The next project students are doing as well is a narrative-based project. So one of the things we're interested in is how much creative input does an editor have in relation to a narrative, and how closely do you work with the director in the edit room?
So, like I said, there was a bit that I did working on some comedy scripted things in Australia and my own projects, but most of the work that I've done has been reality or documentary based. But you would work very closely with the director if you were working on a scripted or drama piece or feature film. I think sometimes like you have director's cuts where entire scenes are lost, and it can change the whole feeling of a film. So a lot happens in the edit room and a lot ends up on the floor. So in terms of media that's lost or decided to be cut out. In terms of the reality side of things, that's definitely a really collaborative process. I have the tendency to kind of just try and make scenes just look like pretty and fun, and then I'm reminded that I still have to make the thing make sense. So it's quite good to have someone in the room with you, and they keep you in check, and you work through the story points and make sure that everything's making sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
collaboration is really, really important, I
Yeah.
think, and it's something our students do a lot of. So we'll move on to another question. So you've worked for a number of different production companies and for different TV stations. Would you say there's any big difference between the different stations and what they kind of require from you as an editor?
Yeah, I mean, when I decided that I was going to put down roots in London and try and really go for it, I think I started work at a small production company called Angel Eye, and at that point they were making content for the Open University. So some days I'd be working on a bit of film about psychotherapy and CBT practices, and then the next day it would be Mexican art and things like that. I managed to go out on some shoots, which was cool, but kind of lost my way. But when it wasn't until I got into a bigger production, so when I basically I got to a level of editor at Angel Eye. I started as an edit assistant. Once I got to the level of editor, I went freelance. That was right at the beginning of the pandemic. Then I worked on bigger productions, and things like The Circle was my first big gig. And just to experience what it's like to work on a huge production like that was quite amazing. From the perspective of being an editor, you just kind of have a clear outline of what your job is when you're working on the bigger productions. They give you what's called commissions. So someone watches everything, like a whole team of people watch everything live, and they live log everything that's said, and then a producer will decide if a conversation is valuable, and they'll give you an in and out time code. Then they'll print that off onto a piece of paper. That becomes a commission. So everything's listed on a whiteboard, and your name's just assigned next to each commission. So it's really structured in that way, because there's so much to get through, and the turnaround is like an episode a day or 2 days. So compared to when you're working on like The Traitors, for example, where you're just left on your own to cut an episode yourself, if it's going out like Love Island or The Circle or I'm a Celebrity, those kind of shows, the structure is really strict. So you're given a scene, they kind of highlight the main bullet points of what it is that you need to look at. And you do get some autonomy about how to cut the scene, but essentially you need to hit those main story points, because they've got an idea of how they want the story arc of the entire episode to be. So that's how it's different, I guess.
Yeah. What would you say is more fun, though? Would it be the smaller productions or the bigger ones?
I think I prefer having more autonomy.
Yeah.
It's nice sometimes. It's almost like a bit of a break mentally when you're working on a show and it feels a bit more paint by numbers. Like there are levels of control you can have. You can put what music you want on. You still need to cut maybe a half an hour conversation down to like a minute and a half. So you're still making lots of decisions on what to lose. But overall, those productions as well are so heavily covered. There might be 20 cameras covering one scene. So like I was mentioning earlier, it's less of a puzzle. Everything's kind of covered for you. Whereas if you're working on a more observational documentary show, maybe two people like who are famous from a reality show might be getting married or something like that. There's less cameras and more can go wrong on the day, and it's a bit more fun. And it's more forgiving as well, so you can have a bit more creative control, and people accept that maybe the cameras might be a bit shaky in some points. It just feels a bit like there's more energy in it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. I think we've got some questions from the audience now. So who would like to go first?
Hi, my name's Kai, and I just want to ask, what editor's work should I study to improve my knowledge?
Other than my own, no, I'm joking. There's a lot of editors out there who I'm inspired by, but it depends what sort of work you want to do, because I mean, we're talking about reality TV and television, but obviously there's advertising and promotional work, which all kind of requires you to wear different hats. So if you're interested in like motion graphics as well, because there's a lot of that kind of blends in with promotional work and advertising, then maybe look at someone in that industry. Or if you're more interested in feature film, we were talking about Scorsese and who did I go to recently in the Design Museum? Who did 2001?
Stanley
Kubrick. Yeah, Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick's editor, I can't remember the name, but they had a real close relationship, and sometimes they'd like argue in the room. But if you're trying to see about how an editor would influence the production, I think that would be a good way to go. Or in the industry, I mean, when I first was trying to break into the industry, I was looking at the credits all the time and like trying to Google people and trying to figure out who these people were, and I couldn't understand how they got in, and I was trying to find a kind of glimmering light and trying to figure out what path they'd done and what was specific about the way that they worked that meant that they were at the top of their game, sort of thing. But I think just look at the editors to the work that inspires you, because then you're going to hone your own personal style. And if you're working on things that you like to work on, then you're going to be good at your job. So that would be my recommendation. Yeah.
That's good advice. Just enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
Thank you. Who's next?
Have you ever worked abroad in other countries? If so, what would your tips be in working in different countries?
So I mentioned earlier the internship in Amsterdam. That was pretty much fresh out of university. I would 100% recommend it if you can do it. Obviously, with the EU now, it's a bit trickier to get work overseas, but they have introduced. Some countries have got these things called digital nomad visas. So if you can work for a UK company and get paid by a UK company, you can live in certain countries. But I think I had a good experience working in Australia as well. I went to Sydney and spent 6 months working in Sydney in the TV industry. I did the first series of Gogglebox Australia. So my job then was, I was quite junior still. My job was it was a night shift, and I was responsible for setting off Skybox recordings to record all of the stuff that was scheduled on the TV, and then I would cut those shows down to kind of like the scenes that the producers wanted the people on the sofas to look at, and that's what my job was through the night. So in the end, I had this like hour-long timeline that was showed to them, and they all react to it and talk about it on the show. But again, there's you're going to struggle to unless it's an English-speaking country, or if you speak other languages, amazing. You need to probably go to an English-speaking country if you want to get work in the industry, and I would recommend Australia, New Zealand, maybe America. And there are like a demand for people in the industry out there as well. Definitely go for it. And if you've got any contacts or again friends that might know people in the industry, then try and exploit those as well.
It's interesting when you mention Gogglebox. So I kind of always assume that the people watching Gogglebox will watch like an entire episode or something. So they don't.
No.
They just watch like a little snippet.
Yeah.
Oh. Because I remember watching it and they were watching Jaws.
Yeah.
And presumably they were just watching like 2 or 3 minutes then.
Yeah, they'll just watch the moment where the divers go into the underground boat and the head, like a decapitated head rolls out. I think they just watch those scenes and react to them.
Wow. See?
They're all
learned
actors.
something.
They're all actors.
Everyone's an actor. Okay, and can we have some more questions? Maria?
What makes you motivated in your job?
I have to say, the industry there's long hours sometimes, but it's a very supportive and very encouraging industry. If you feel like the team's kind of struggling, people do rally around to try and kind of lift morale. Like, I've worked on The Circle, was my first big reality show. That was 11-hour night shifts, 6 days a week for 3 months. So that sounds pretty grim, but it ended up being one of the best jobs that I did, just purely because the team around you, everyone kind of loves what they do, and everyone's really helpful and encouraging. So that's something that gives me a real buzz. And also, from an editor's perspective, you get notes back on your cuts. So it's quite unusual to have a job where you receive regular feedback on what it is that you do. Like, for example, if you were a filmmaker, if you were shooting like a camera person, once you've kind of filmed your stuff, it goes to the edit. Sometimes you might get feedback on what you could have done better, but generally you don't really know what you filmed has been used until you see the finished show. As an editor, once you've got a rough cut together, you submit that to your seniors or the channel. So say you were working on Drag Race, you send it first to your executive producers, and then there's another viewing with the BBC, and they give you feedback on what they want you to do better. So or they give you feedback on what you've done well, depends how good you've been that day. But that's quite a nice thing to receive, because as you're going through your job, you know you're getting better, and you're receiving constant feedback is quite helpful. So that's something that I really like, that's specific to post-production. And it's varied as well. So I think the longest job I do at the moment would probably be around 3 months, but generally speaking, they're maybe 2 months on average. And it's quite nice to be meeting new people all the time, to be working on different things. Like I said, you'll be sat with one other person in the room, an edit producer. Sometimes that's a bit of an awkward interaction, because you might not get on with that person and you're stuck with them for 2 months, but at least everyone stays professional, and you might butt heads a lot over certain things, but it's only a 2-month job, and then you're on to something new. And vice versa, you could be working with someone who you really get on with. So some people I've worked with have ended up like being friends and coming to my wedding and things like that. So it's a really nice environment to work in from that perspective as well.
Sounds really good, but I want to go back to the point you made about working long hours.
Yeah.
So 6 days a week, 11 days, 66 hours a week.
Yeah.
Does that surprise anyone? Does anyone go, yeah, that sounds fantastic, I want to work 66 hours a week? But you get really good experiences from it. It's just like, that's a long time.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time as well, you'd be having lunch at your desk on those jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not encouraged to do that, and people would have breaks, but it actually goes really quickly, because it's such a fast-paced job, and you're trying to it was only on those jobs where you're trying to turn around an episode within 2 days. So for that, there would probably be to be able to turn around an episode in 2 days, you'd have a day shift and a night shift, and there would be maybe 12 hours day and night, so 24 editors working across 2 days to get the whole thing just ready to be put on TV the next day, the next day.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so but it's a bit of a buzz, and I guess the plus side to it is once you've done a job like that, you do get paid per day. So you get paid for that 6th day, you get paid for working unsociable hours, and then the way I think about it is across, say you do 7 weeks doing 6 days a week, you're essentially doing 8 weeks. Yeah. You're doing an extra 7 days. So then you can take time off in between jobs as well. If you're freelance, you're in control of your own schedule. So it's quite nice to have that flexibility. So it's definitely kind of like a work hard, play hard situation. You put your head down and work intensely for a while, but then you know that you can relax for a few weeks maybe.
Sounds good. Let's see, we have a few more questions from the audience. Who have we got? Spencer. Thank you.
What's the most memorable thing you've worked on, and what work has made you feel proud?
I think this year I worked on Drag Race UK, which is quite a tough show to get onto. I'm surprised they hired me, to be honest, but I had a friend actually, and he was working on Drag Race in a room next to mine, and I kind of like fangirled a little bit when I saw Michelle Visage come through. I just know that it would be such a fun and tough show to work on, and that was one of the shows where I think it was a 8-week schedule for that, and it's so specific as a brand. There's like there's sound effects, specific sound effects that you need to put underneath certain sections, and if they're maybe like 2 frames out, the people who've worked on it for 10 years will tell you. So it was a real challenge, but yeah, that was definitely a proud moment. But I would say the most fun show that I've worked on is probably one of the ones, like I was saying, like a larger reality format. So The Circle was my first freelance gig, and that was up in Manchester. It was actually, the edit was ran from a disused college, so it was a bit of like a building like this, but it was I think it was condemned and due to be knocked down, so it kind of added to the dystopian weird vibe. There was like pipes running everywhere and it was a bit leaky, but yeah, I met loads of amazing people on that, and that really helped me kind of set my path for the other jobs that I got afterwards. And yeah, it was a challenge, but in the daytime we managed to like see a bit of Manchester and have a laugh together as a big team. So that was, yeah, the first kind of experience that I'd had on a show of that scale, and I really enjoyed that.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I think we've got no more time for questions.
Yeah.
But we do have time to give you the opportunity to plug and promote any projects that you're currently working on. So you can get these students to tell you a little bit, to go and watch it.
I'm working on The Traitors Series 2 at the moment. That's going to be out on the 3rd of January next year. And yeah, you definitely should tune into that if you like that kind of thing. Then I think there's some other exciting stuff coming up next year from Studio Lambert. Potentially working on another series of Squid Game on Netflix, that kind of thing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Has anyone here seen The Traitors? Who said yes? Should all make sure you watch the second series, because I was absolutely addicted to it. So thank you so much for coming in today and asking the questions. We really appreciate your time and all your advice. Yeah, you've been great. Thank you. Very big round of applause for Jack.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. And a big thanks to our studio audience for all their really good questions. Thank you. Make sure you follow us on air at HCR On Air and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future events. I've been Chris Butler. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.